Hello everyone, my name is Cody Hope, and today I'm going to be doing a deck tech on my Simic Merfolk list in Historic, which I recently took to an 8-2 finish in the Historic Challenge on Magic the Gathering Arena. Here is the published list on MTG Arena Zone, and we're going to go over here to a more interactive version of the deck list. So the reason why we're playing Merfolk is it is a tempo deck that can be aggressive while providing some disruption. And let's start off with our tribal synergies. So we have 8 lords in the deck. We have a playset of Merfolk Mistbinder, a 2-mana 2/2 that gives all of our other Merfolk +1/+1. This is a great way to push through damage. And the other one, this comes from a historic anthology collection, Marrow Reedry, originally from Lorwyn. 2 and a blue for a 2/2 that gives all of our Merfolk +1/+1, and this is a big one. Whenever we cast a Merfolk spell, we can tap or untap a permanent. This serves 2 functions. It helps us with our tempo game plan, where we can tap down our opponent's blockers and be able to attack through them, or we can also use it to untap our own mana and then be able to cast multiple things a turn ahead of curve. So those are our 2 lords that I think really tie the whole deck together. Some of our other aggressive cards that we have in the deck, we have 8 1-drops. We have 4 Benthic Biomancers. Benthic Biomancer, a 1-mana 1/1 that we can adapt for 1 and a blue. So we put a 1/1 counter on it, and whenever we put a 1/1 counter on it, we get to draw a card and then discard a card. Just great to have on turn 1, and this is a card that's fine late in the game too. We can play this thing on turn 5, play it, and immediately adapt it to throw away excess lands or dead cards in a matchup to get to hopefully draw into some more gas. The other 1-drop we have is Kumina's Speaker. This is a 1-mana 1/1 Merfolk. This one's a green one though, and it gets +1/+1 as long as we control another Merfolk or an island. So turn 1, we cast this off of a breeding pool. We have a 1-mana 2/2. We will play a Merfolk on turn 2, so we're going to be attacking for 2 to 3 damage if we get a Lord out on turn 2. This really helps us get underneath some of the combo matchups or some of the control decks, just being able to attack for 3 on turn 2 and then incrementally escalate that damage to close out the game. Many matches are won off of turn 1 Kumina Speaker, turn 2 Merfolk Mistbinder. Some other cards we have Merfolk Branchwalker, 1 and a green for a 2/1 Merfolk. When it enters the battlefield, it explores. So we reveal the top card of our library. If it's a land, it goes to our hand. Otherwise, we put a 1/1 counter on Merfolk Branchwalker and then put that card either back on top or into the graveyard. So this is great on turn 2/turn 3. Helps us kind of sculpt the top of our deck. If it's a land, cool, we have just drawn a card. And if not, we get to pick if we want to draw that card or not. So again, this is a card that's good early game and good late game. On turn 2, we play it. We get to make sure we hit our 3rd land drop, or we can make sure that we're not drawing cards that we don't want anymore. Like if we're really digging for like a lord or a piece of interaction and we see a Kumina Speaker on top, we can put that into the graveyard. Or if we see a lord, that's great, we can leave that on top. So Branchwalker, a great way to sculpt our draws in the early game as well as the late game. We play this thing on turn 5 and we see a 1-drop, we can put that in the yard. Or if it's a land, we're just drawing a card. In a similar vein, we have 4 Silvergill Adept, 1 and a blue for a 2/1. As an additional cost, we either pay 3 or most often we're going to be revealing a Merfolk from our hand. When it enters the battlefield, we draw a card. Great to play on turn 2. It's fine in the late game too. Just helping us keep up our card advantage against our opponent. Helping with that tempo plan of making it where if they're going to spend a bunch of removal to kill our creatures, they're 2 for 1ing themselves because we've drawn cards off of the creatures that we've played. Another great big aggro card in the deck, and this one has won me a lot of games, is Kumina Tyrant of Araska. 1, a blue and a green for a 2/4 Merfolk. It is legendary, and it has all the modes. We can tap a Merfolk to make Kumina unblockable. That matters a lot in sometimes matchups where the board gets really clogged up. Like we can't really favorably attack through anything, or we have a Planeswalker that we have to kill. We can make Kumina unblockable and then attack that Planeswalker or attack in for lethal at our opponent. We can tap 3 Merfolk to draw a card. This is great too in those attrition-based matchups. We don't attack. On instep of our opponent's turn, we tap 3 Merfolk to draw a card. Or if we really have to block, we can declare blockers, tap our Merfolk before damage to draw a card. And this last one will straight up help you push through damage on those really aggressive or those really like attrition, the board gets clogged up type of matches. We can tap 5 Merfolk to put a 1/1 counter on each Merfolk we control. So that's awesome. That adds 5 plus power to the board. And that has a really nice interaction with Benthic Biomancer. So whenever we put a 1/1 counter on Benthic Biomancer, we get to loot. So if we just have a bunch of lands, the board's clogged up, we're trying to push through damage, we can just hold back in step, tap 5 Merfolk with Kumina, put a 1/1 counter on everything, loot with Benthic Biomancer, hopefully draw some gas, discard an excess land, something like that. So Kumina is a good Swiss Army knife for this deck, and it helps the deck be more versatile, especially in best of 1 play. Now, I did say that this deck is trying to take a bit of a tempo roll, so let's take a look at some of our interactive creatures. We have 4 Merfolk Tricksters. If you've played Mono Blue Tempo at all, you're very familiar with this card. 2 blue for a 2/2 Merfolk, has flash. When it enters the battlefield, we tap a creature an opponent controls. It loses all abilities until end of turn. So this is flash speed. This is great if you want to remove the abilities from something. So for example, you're up against a deck that has a Platinum Angel out. You get them to 0 life. You can flash in Merfolk Trickster, tap down their Platinum Angel. It loses the ability that says they can't lose the game. Then the game's over. Same thing with like Phyrexian Obliterator. Whenever you deal damage to Phyrexian Obliterator, you have to sacrifice that many permanents. So your opponent very confidently attacks in with their Obliterator. You can flash in Merfolk Trickster, remove all the Obliterator's abilities, and then you're able to safely block that creature. This is also great if, let's say, you're up against like the dinosaur deck, and they play a real big threat, right? They play that the 5/4 that has Enrage, and you don't want to get hit for 5. So at the beginning of combat, you can flash in the Trickster, tap down the creature. It no longer can attack now. This card is also great when you combine it with Marrow Regery, because then it helps you push through damage to win the game. You play your Trickster, you can tap down an opponent's creature with Marrow Regery, and then when Trickster enters the battlefield, tap down another creature. So really great there. Helps to get a surprise blocker. Like Merfolk Trickster is an all-star in this deck, and it really helps with that tempo roll because we are disrupting our opponent and then having a creature left behind to push through damage. The next one we have 4 Brazen Borrower. 4 Brazen Borrower. This card is great. For 1 and a blue, we can cast the adventure side of it, which is Petty Theft, and it is return a non-land permanent and opponent controls to its hand. This is great. Against the aggro matchups, we can bounce their big creature that they've tapped out to play. Against other tribal decks, we can bounce their lord, right? So in like the mirror match, they think that their creatures are the appropriate power toughness to get good trades in, to eat some of our creatures. We just Petty Theft their lord, all their creatures shrink, and now suddenly what has become good blocks have become this huge blowout. Brazen Borrower, the Petty Theft side, has won me plenty of games. Great at tempoing out our opponent. It's a great combat trick. Just a great way to help control the game state a little bit. And it leaves behind a 3/1 flash flying creature. Sometimes against blue-white control, if you draw a Brazen Borrower late in the game, or any control deck for that matter, and the boards are relatively empty, you're both running low on resources, you just flash in a 3/1 flyer, and boom, you're hitting them for 3 every turn. That can win you some games too. Also great that you get to do both, right? You Petty Theft a thing to their hand, and then immediately cast the Brazen Borrower afterwards. And now you have interacted with your opponent while also putting a clock on them. And then finally, we have a playset of Wizard's Retort. 1 blue for counterspell, counter target spell. But it costs 1 less to cast if we control a wizard. And Historic is a little bit of a slower format, so casting this for 3 isn't the worst thing in the world. But we have plenty of wizards in the deck. Benthic Biomancer is a wizard. Merfolk Trickster is a wizard. Silvergill Adept is a wizard. So we have 12 wizards in the deck. So pretty frequently you're going to be able to cast this thing for just 2 blue. This is great. You know, there are so many things in the format that you want to counter, from these big problematic planeswalkers to something like maybe a Gray Merchant, a Dream Trawler, something like that. Like, this is just great at preventing the big things that you don't want to see hitting the board from hitting the board. So Wizard's Retort is great. So between those bits of interaction, we are able to slow our opponent down just enough that we're able to kind of curve out, play our creatures, play all of our lords, and win the game from there. Going over to the mana base, we are running 21 lands. Play set of Breeding Pool, play set of Hinterland Harbor, good dual lands, 4 unclaimed territory, which 9 times out of 10 we're putting on Merfolk. We're running a bunch of Merfolk in the deck. Every now and again, you might have to put unclaimed territory on like Fairy to cast your Brazen Borrower. So that happens like one out of every 10 times because we are running a full play set of Brazen Borrower. Otherwise, we're putting this on Merfolk every other time. So we have 12 sources of green for all of our creatures, 8 islands, and a singular forest. And honestly, if you could probably just go up to 9 islands and no forests, I do like having the one for in case they Field of Ruin your only green source. That way you can fetch out this one forest just in case. Most of our spells are either blue, double blue, or if there is green, it's only one green source. So you don't want to have a lot of lands that only produce green. You want lands that produce both, or if they have to produce just one color, producing blue, because you have lots of double blue with Merfolk Trickster, Brazen Borrower, things like that, Wizard's Retort, the like. Something you may notice, there is no sideboard here. That historic event is a sideboarded event. It is best 2 out of 3. We don't have a sideboard. So if you've watched me stream it all on Twitch, I typically just play the best of 1 ranked queue on Arena. So I didn't have a sideboard for this deck. I did not realize when I registered for the Historic Challenge event that it was a 2 out of 3 event. So I finish up game 1, and then it goes to the sideboarding screen, and that was a big shock. I was like, oh no, we are not going to do well because we don't have a sideboard. All of our opponents they're going to sideboard into lots of interaction, lots of removal, ways to counter our things, and then we're just going to get run over. But that didn't happen. We were able to go 8-2. We got the maximum number of wins possible. And I was thinking about why that happened. How are we able to get 8 wins without a sideboard? And I think just like our answers are pretty ubiquitous, right? Like Wizard's Retort counters anything. Any deck, Wizard's Retort is pretty good. Brazen Borrower bounces a non-land permanent, so it bounces just about anything that we're worried about. So like those 8 pieces of interaction just combined with our great beatdown plan, like things like Merfolk Trickster and Kumina to like gain that incremental value, I think that was just enough to get us there a lot of the times. We played against a lot of control matchups, and just like between Wizard's Retort countering their board wipes or countering like their Teferi Hero of Dominarias, using Brazen Borrower to like bounce big creatures against the aggro matchups, like we were just able to like execute our game plan every time, even post sideboard when they brought in lots of removal. We just had a ton of answers to what they were trying to do. So, you know, that worked out for us in our favor. I think it showcases the strength of this deck. It's great in best of 1 and it's good in best of 3. Really showcases the power of Merfolk in Historic. So you might be asking, all right, well, if you could have a do-over and go in with a sideboard, what would your sideboard look like? Maybe we don't go 8-2. Maybe we just go 8-0 if we had a pretty good sideboard. And I don't know, I would have to play test a lot more to determine what I would put into my sideboard. Some things that I'm just thinking about roughly off the top of my head is bringing in just different counter spells for different matchups. So I would want things like Mystical Dispute, Spell Pierce, maybe even like a Frilled Mystic maybe, but I think with Frilled Mystic we might have to change up our mana base a little bit. So just like more efficient counter spells, right? I said that that it's fine to cast Wizard's Retort for free, and that is true, but maybe against blue-white control, we want to take out all of our like Brazen Borrowers because we're not really going to bounce too many things in the control matchup and just bring in a full play set of Spell Pierce. That might just be better. So that's what my sideboard would look like if I was to make one. I would just put in a ton of counter magic, like the different flavors of counter magic, like Spell Pierce, Aether Gust, Mystical Dispute. That's what I would be considering bringing in. I like our creature base. I would like to think I'm running the most efficient Merfolk that are in Historic. So there aren't really a bunch of Merfolk we're going to pack in the sideboard. They're all here in the main deck. I would just maybe tweak my interaction based on the matchup. If I'm against more creature matches, maybe then I can bring in the Aether Gusts, take out the Wizard's Retort, things like that. So if you were to put a sideboard on this, that's what I would look at. Before we wrap up, I wanted to very quickly address some cards that I'm not running that a lot of other decks are, just some slight modifications I've made to the deck from others. I'm sure that if you're watching this, you are familiar with Nikachu. He's another content creator who has done quite a few videos on Historic Merfolk. Nikachu was running quite a lot of lands in his list. He was running 24, 25 lands, and then cutting things like the Brazen Borrowers, running less Kuminas. And I just don't think that's entirely correct. I found through my playtesting, you really kind of want 20 to 21 lands, because you want to have enough lands that you can consistently get to 3 mana for things like Kumena, things like Marrow Reejerey, and even hitting like your 4th land drop so you can start casting multiple spells a turn. But you don't want to go too many that you flood out. I was having the experience when I went above 21 lands that I was just flooding constantly. I was constantly hitting 6, 7, 8 land drops. I was adapting my Benthic Biomancers to draw more lands and then discard more lands. So I think 20 to 21 lands is about where you want to be. The other card that I see like Jeff Hoogland running, I know he has also been a big advocate for Historic Merfolk, is a deep root elite, 1 in a green for a 1/1, has an ability that when a Merfolk enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on any Merfolk that you control. And that card looks great on paper, and it is. Deep Root Elite is great when you cast it on turn 2. You cast that card turn 2, and then every turn after that, your guys are constantly getting bigger, and you're probably able to take over the game. However, if you don't have it on turn 2 and you draw it turn 4, it's not going to be doing what you want it to do. It's just going to be a 2-mana 1/1, which is not what you want. I like every creature in this deck. Every card in the deck is great when you cast it on curve, cast it the earliest you can, but it's also great when you draw it turn 5, turn 6, turn 7 even. Benthic Biomancer is a fine draw on turn 7. We can cast it and adapt it immediately. As long as you're holding on to at least 1 land in your hand, like you're not empty-handed, as long as you're holding on to something, then you can have something to loot away immediately. Brazen Borrower is fine early and late game. It's great early to tempo out with a Petty Theft. It's great late game to keep us alive, bouncing their big haymakers and then having this 3/1 attacker. Kumena is great. It can come down, and again, the tap abilities on this do not care about summoning sickness, so we can just play Kumena and immediately start drawing cards or pumping our team. Things like Branchwalker and Silvergill Adept are going to sculpt our draws immediately. The Lords immediately pump up our team when we play it. Everything in the deck is fine on curve, but it's also fine in the late game, and I think that is what allows this tempo deck to function at the highest level. So if you're running things like Deep Root Elite, it kind of pushes you more into that aggressive game plan where you aren't trying to interact as much and you're just trying to put creatures on the battlefield and turn them sideways. So those are the couple card options that I see other people who are trying out this type of deck using that I currently am not. That's my thoughts on the deck. If you have any questions, you can please leave them in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe to me on YouTube, and follow me on Twitch. I'm on Twitch at the Cody Hope, and you can find me streaming tribal decks across Magic. I play a lot of Historic and Merfolk, things like Spirits and Pioneer, Merfolk and Modern, Goblins and Legacy. If you want to learn how to play tribal decks at a competitive level, you can follow me on Twitch at the Cody Hope to find me streaming. And with that, my name is Cody. I hope you learned something new, and I will see you next time.